You know that feeling? The one where you're watching a train wreck in slow motion, but you're the one who laid the tracks. That was me. I was sitting in my apartment, the city lights of downtown blurring into a watercolor painting through the window, watching the man who had been my boss for 11 years self-destruct on a live feed from City Hall, and I had handed him the shovel. If this story sounds familiar, if you've ever poured your soul into something just to have someone else sign their name at the bottom, then stick around. It helps to know you're not screaming into the void. Let me know in the comments if you've been there, and don't forget to like and subscribe, because tonight we're talking about building your own foundations when someone else tries to tear them down. My name is Savannah, and I'm an architect. Not the kind that designs tasteful kitchen extensions for suburban dentists. I design the future. My medium is steel, glass, and computational fluid dynamics. For the last 2 years, my entire existence had been consumed by a single project, the Citadel. It was our firm's biggest ever pitch, a $200 million sustainable city tower that promised to be a net zero icon on the skyline. It wasn't just a building, it was a statement. It was my statement. The heart of the Citadel wasn't its soaring height or its crystalline facade. It was something you couldn't see. A revolutionary passive heating and cooling system I had designed from the ground up. I called it the Athelred system, named after an obscure Anglo-Saxon king, a private joke for myself. It was a network of internal convection channels, thermal mass conduits, and microvents, all managed by a proprietary algorithm that learned and predicted the building's thermal behavior. It was the building's lungs and its circulatory system. It was, without exaggeration, a masterpiece, my masterpiece. Then came Callum. Callum was a partner at the firm, my boss, a man who wore $1,000 suits that couldn't hide the fact that he was professionally obsolete. He hadn't drafted a blueprint in a decade, not a real one. His expertise was the long lunch, the firm handshake, the political maneuvering that happened in boardrooms, not drafting rooms. He saw my work. He saw the data, the flawless energy models, the sheer elegance of the solution, and he saw his chance. He called me into his office, the one with the panoramic view I had helped design the alcove for. He didn't ask me to sit. He stood by the window, his back to me, looking out at the city he wanted to put his name on. He said, "Savannah, the Citadel is brilliant, truly, but a project of this magnitude, with this much on the line with the city council, it requires a senior voice to sell the vision." A senior voice. The words hung in the air-conditioned space between us, cold and sterile. He turned, and his face was a mask of paternalistic concern. It was a look he'd perfected. The look that said, "This is for your own good," even as he was picking my pocket. He told me he would be presenting the project to the council. He would be the face of it. My face, my data, my renderings, my 2 years of sleepless nights and caffeine-fueled breakthroughs would be presented by his voice. I felt a quiet heat flush up my neck, the kind that signals either rage or humiliation. In that moment it was both. But I had learned long ago that in our world, in the world he had built, emotion was a liability. So I just nodded. I said, "I understand, Callum. Of course, whatever is best for the project." He smiled, relieved. "Atta girl, Savannah. I knew you'd see the bigger picture. Just package up the presentation deck, the core schematics, and the digital blueprints. Send them over to my assistant by end of day." He walked into that council meeting 2 days later with my soul on a USB stick. He strode to the podium, the city seal behind him, ready to accept the accolades, the contracts, the legacy that came with a $200 million masterpiece. But here's the thing about building something from the ground up. You know where all the load-bearing walls are. You also know which ones are just for show. The digital blueprints I'd supplied him were intentionally, meticulously, incomplete. They were a beautiful, intricate, and utterly hollow shell. They were missing the one thing that made the whole system work. They were missing Athelred, the one proprietary algorithm that managed the airflow distribution. Without it, the Citadel was just a very expensive, very beautiful greenhouse that would fail its energy targets within the first heat wave. I watched the live stream from my laptop. Callum was magnetic. He moved through my slides with an unearned confidence, speaking my words as if they were his own. He pointed to my renderings, talking about thermal mass and convection currents, with the conviction of a man who had Googled the terms that morning, and then it happened. A woman on the council, a sharp-eyed engineer named Miss Albright, leaned into her microphone. "Mr. Blackwood," she said, her voice cutting through the polite applause, "an impressive proposal. But I'm looking at your energy model on slide 72. You're projecting a 90% reduction in HVAC load, which is aggressive to say the least. The schematics show no significant external HVAC units. Can you explain the specific mechanism that governs the airflow distribution to compensate for real-time thermal fluctuations? How does the building self-regulate?" The camera zoomed in on Callum's face. He smiled, a politician's smile, and clicked back to the slide. He stared at it. It was a complex diagram of the building's core, a web of channels and vents I had drawn myself. It was artfully designed to look complete, but to an expert eye there was a hole right in the middle of it, a logical gap. He stared at the slide I had built for him, the trap I had laid, and for the first time in a decade, Callum Blackwood was left utterly speechless. The senior voice was silent, and in the quiet of my apartment, I closed the laptop. The show was over. The real work was about to begin. The silence in my apartment, after I closed the laptop, was a physical thing. It was heavier than air. The faint hum of the refrigerator, the distant moan of a siren, all of it seemed to be happening in another world. My world had shrunk to the space inside my own skull, where a storm was finally breaking. For a moment, just a moment, I allowed the mask of professional composure to crack. I slid off the sofa and sat on the floor, my back against the cool leather, and I let the full weight of the last 11 years press down on me. It wasn't just this one betrayal. It was never just one. This was just the loudest, the most brazen. It was the culmination of 1,000 tiny cuts, a quiet, steady erosion of my professional soul. My hands were shaking, not with rage anymore, but with a deep, bone-aching exhaustion. I thought about Callum's face on the screen, that blank, panicked stare as his brain scrambled for an answer he didn't have, for knowledge he hadn't earned. There was a sliver of dark satisfaction in it, I won't lie, but it was overwhelmed by a profound sense of sorrow. Sorrow for the person I had allowed myself to become, the silent partner in my own erasure. My mind started to drift back, unspooling the timeline of my career at the firm, searching for the point where the tracks had switched. When had I ceded so much ground? When I first joined Sterling in Blackwood, fresh out of my master's program, Callum was different, or maybe I was. He was the charismatic partner who took an interest in the quiet, intense girl from the technical university. He saw the spark in my portfolio. He'd walk by my desk, look at my early drafts, and say things like, "Good bones, Savannah. Keep pushing the envelope." He gave me opportunities, put me on challenging projects, and for a while I saw him as a mentor. He was building my career, and I was fiercely loyal in return. The first crack appeared about 3 years in. It was a library project, a modest municipal building, but it had a tricky facade design, a complex brise-sol that had to provide shade without obscuring a key view of the park. I worked on it for weeks, running simulations, building physical models. I solved it. I found an elegant, interlocking pattern that was both beautiful and perfectly functional. I was proud. I presented it in an internal review. Callum loved it. He clapped me on the shoulder and said, "Excellent work." The next week, the design was featured in an industry magazine. The article praised Callum Blackwood's innovative approach to passive solar design. My name was nowhere, not in the text, not in the credits. When I tentatively brought it up, he waved it away. "Oh, it's just industry politics, Savannah. The editors want a partner's name. It carries more weight. It's good for the firm, and what's good for the firm is good for you. You're a team player. I know that." I was young. I was hungry. I swallowed it. I told myself it was true. This is how the game is played. My time would come. I put my head down and worked harder. But the incidents kept coming. like a slow drip of water on stone, a structural solution for a concert hall that was our idea, a materials innovation on a corporate campus that became his breakthrough. He was a master of absorption. He'd listen to my ideas, nod, ask intelligent questions, and then, days or weeks later, he would repeat them in a meeting with the senior partners, as if they had sprung fully formed from his own mind. He was a ventriloquist, and I was the silent dummy on his knee. The worst part was his gaslighting. He never overtly stole. He would co-opt. He would say things like, as Savannah and I were discussing, and then proceed to explain my concept, subtly reframing it as a joint effort he had initiated. It was death by 1,000 collaborative pronouns. And if I ever tried to gently correct the record to say, well, my initial thought was, he would look at me with that same paternalistic disappointment. Don't be territorial, Savannah. We're a team. We rise and fall together. It was brilliant, in a sociopathic way. He was using the language of teamwork to enforce a hierarchy of theft. Why did I stay? That's the question, isn't it? The question I was asking myself on the floor of my apartment as the city hummed on without me. It's the question you're probably asking right now. It wasn't simple. It was a web of justifications I had woven for myself. The firm had resources, the best software, the biggest clients. I was working on projects I couldn't get anywhere else. I told myself that the work was the thing, the purity of the design, the silent satisfaction of solving the puzzle. I told myself that real architects, the ones who mattered, would see the truth in the details of the blueprints. They would know my handiwork, my signature, even if my name wasn't on the door. And there was another, deeper reason, a reason tied to the very core of the Citadel's design. The Athelred algorithm wasn't born at Stirling in Blackwood. It was conceived years earlier, in the hushed, dusty halls of my university, in collaboration with the one true mentor I ever had. Dr. Alistair Finch. He was my thesis advisor, a semi-retired professor of thermodynamic engineering and architectural theory. He was a brilliant, eccentric man with a wild mane of white hair and a mind that saw the world in vectors of heat and light. He saw architecture not as static objects, but as living systems. He called buildings sheltering machines. We spent countless hours in his cluttered office, surrounded by stacks of books and the smell of old paper and Earl Grey tea. He would sketch on napkins, on whiteboards, on the back of envelopes, explaining how ancient Roman villas used atriums for passive cooling, how Persian wind catchers could chill a room in the desert heat. He believed modern architecture had forgotten its most fundamental purpose, to work with nature, not against it. He saw the same passion in me. He pushed me. He challenged my assumptions. Our conversations were a fusion of physics and poetry. It was Alistair who first planted the seed of a self-regulating building. What if, Savannah, he'd once said, his eyes twinkling, what if a building could breathe, not just metaphorically? What if it could inhale the cool night air and exhale the day's heat? What if it could learn? After I graduated, we stayed in touch. The Athelred concept became our private project, our intellectual hobby. I would work my long hours at the firm, designing the things Callum wanted, and then I would go home and work on my own rig, running simulations, writing the foundational code. Alistair would send me cryptic emails with links to academic papers on chaos theory or biological homeostatic systems. It was a secret language. He was the theorist. I was the architect. I was translating his brilliant, scattered ideas into a functional digital reality. When Alistair got sick, our work took on a new urgency. His body was failing, but his mind was as sharp as ever. In his last few months, we worked feverishly. He knew he wouldn't see it built, but he wanted to see it work. I remember the night the simulation finally stabilized. I was on a video call with him from his hospice bed. I ran the program, and on the screen, the virtual model of a tower began to manage its own temperature. Ghostly blue and red currents of air moving through its digital veins. It was working. Alistair just watched, silent, for a full minute. A single tear traced a path through the wrinkles on his cheek. He looked at me through the screen and whispered, "That's it, my girl. That's the ghost in the machine. He died a week later. The Athelred algorithm wasn't just code. It was Alistair's legacy. It was our legacy. And I had brought it to Stirling and Blackwood because it was the only place with the resources to give it a body of steel and glass. I was willing to let Callum put the firm's name on it, but I would not let him claim its soul. That was the line. And he had crossed it without a moment's hesitation. I pushed myself up from the floor. The cold resolve was beginning to crystallize in my veins, displacing the exhaustion. The years of swallowing my pride, of telling myself it was for the good of the project. It all seemed like a colossal fool's errand now. The project was me. The project was Alistair. I walked over to my desk and powered up my personal laptop, not the firm's. I entered a password, a long string of alphanumeric characters. That was the title of Alistair's favorite T.S. Eliot poem. A single folder sat alone on the encrypted desktop. It was labeled Contingency. I thought of the last email Alistair had ever sent me. It came 2 days before he died. It was just a single line, a quote from an old engineering textbook. The best structures are built on an honest foundation. At the time, I thought he was talking about concrete and steel. I realized now he wasn't. A notification pinged on my phone, pulling me from my reverie. It was a news alert from a local business journal. The headline was brutal. Stirling and Blackwood's Citadel pitch falters under council scrutiny. The article was short, but savage. It mentioned an unconvincing presentation by partner Callum Blackwood and unanswered technical questions regarding the project's core energy claims. It said the council had deferred their decision, pending a formal request for supplementary data. The storm I had unleashed was gathering force, but it wasn't a storm of chaos. It was a storm of my own design. I looked back at the contingency folder on my screen. This wasn't about revenge. I kept telling myself that. It wasn't about tearing Callum down. It was about building something on an honest foundation. My foundation. And the first step was to show the world who the real architect was. The contingency folder wasn't a hastily assembled collection of resentful thoughts. It was a parallel life I had been quietly building for years. It was the architectural equivalent of a bug-out bag, packed and ready for the day the world I knew ceased to be viable. Opening it felt less like an act of rebellion, and more like an act of inevitable self-preservation. It was the quiet click of a key turning in a lock I had forged myself. Inside wasn't chaos. It was order. A series of subfolders, neatly labeled, LLC formation, business plan, IP patents, key contacts. It was the skeleton of a new reality. The first folder, LLC formation, contained the legal documents for a company I had registered 18 months ago. Athelred Designs, LLC. It was a simple single-member shell company, legally sound and completely mine. I'd used a small inheritance from my grandmother to pay the legal fees and set up a business bank account, which now held my life savings. It was a lifeboat I'd been building while serving on a ship I knew was taking on water. The business plan was a 50-page document, viewing a vision for a new kind of architectural firm, small, agile, and hyper-focused on cutting-edge sustainable design. It was everything Stirling and Blackwood wasn't. It valued innovation over politics, substance over style. It had market analysis, financial projections, a branding strategy. It was a manifesto. It was the future I wanted to build, not just the buildings in it. The most important folder was IP patents. This was my shield and my sword. Inside were the applications for 2 provisional patents, filed under my name and my LLC. The first was for the core logic of the Athelred algorithm itself. The second was for the unique physical design of the convection channels that made the system so efficient. I had filed them the week after Alistair passed away. It felt like consecrating his memory. I had spent weeks poring over my employment contract with Stirling and Blackwood. It was a standard boilerplate document, and like most large firms, it had an intellectual property clause. But it was poorly written. It claimed ownership of any IP developed using company resources or during company time. This was the debatable detail. the gray area that arrogant people like Callum always miss. I had developed the foundational theory with Alistair on my own time. I had written the first 100,000 lines of code on my own personal computer, a custom-built rig that sat in my home office. I had only ever used the firm's resources to apply the pre-existing system to the Citadel project, porting a sandboxed functional version of the algorithm to their servers for the simulation. I never gave them the source code. They never asked for it. They just saw the magic trick and didn't care how it was done. This was the plausible inaccuracy I was counting on. A legal battle would be messy and expensive, but the provenance, the digital paper trail, was overwhelmingly on my side. I had every email, every file creation date, every simulation log from my personal server. Callum had a PowerPoint deck. It wasn't just about legal protection. It was about creating leverage. The patents ensured that no one could replicate the Athelred system. The Citadel, as designed, could not be built without me. Not by Callum, not by Sterling and Blackwood, not by anyone. I hadn't just removed a gear from the machine. I had taken the engine, and I was the only one with the keys. This foresight wasn't born of cynicism, but of observation. I had seen too many talented people, especially women in my field, have their work absorbed by the corporate machine. They'd invent something brilliant, and the firm would patent it, own it, and give them a small bonus and a pat on the head. Their genius would become a line item on a corporate asset sheet. I promised myself, and I promised Alistair's memory, that would not happen to Athelred. My plan didn't rely solely on legal documents and code. Its true strength was in the last folder, key contacts. It wasn't a stolen client list. It was a curated collection of people I had built genuine relationships with over the years. Engineers, city planners, developers, material suppliers, people who, like me, valued competence over charisma. They were the ones who would call my extension directly instead of going through Callum. They were the ones who would stay late with me on a conference call to solve a problem, long after the partners had gone for the night. I hadn't been networking. I had been building a coalition of the competent. At the top of that list was a name, Liam, a junior architect at the firm, a prodigy with a savant-like understanding of structural mechanics. He was quiet, ferociously smart, and utterly allergic to office politics. I had taken him under my wing when he started, just as Callum had once done for me. But I did it differently. I gave him credit for his work, publicly. I included his name on design drafts. I taught him not just how to design, but how to navigate the treacherous currents of the firm. I had seen the same frustration in his eyes that I felt in my own gut. He was loyal, not to Sterling and Blackwood, but to the work, and to me. My plan didn't involve poaching him. I knew I wouldn't have to. I just had to build a better place to work, and I knew he would find his way there. The other key contact was a developer named Marcus Chen. He was the head of a major international real estate fund, a titan of the industry known for his focus on futuristic, sustainable projects. We had worked together on a smaller tower a few years back. Callum had handled the schmoozing, but I had been the one on late-night calls with Chen's team in Shanghai, ironing out the engineering complexities. Chen was a man of few words, but he saw everything. During one particularly grueling all-nighter, he had said to me directly, "You're the one holding the strings here, aren't you, Savannah? I know a lead architect when I see one. Callum is just the master of ceremonies." That comment had been a spark in the dark. It was a confirmation that the real work was seen, even if it wasn't publicly acknowledged. My strategy was becoming clear. It was a two-pronged attack, executed, not with a cannon, but with a scalpel. I minimized the contingency plan on my screen and opened a new secure email client. The first email was to Miss Albright, the council engineer, the one who had asked the question. Subject: regarding the Spire's energy targets. Dear Miss Albright, my name is Savannah Thorne. I was the lead design architect and systems engineer for the Citadel project at Sterling and Blackwood. I am the sole developer of the proprietary thermal regulation system at the heart of the tower's energy model. It has come to my attention that there were unanswered questions regarding the system's specific mechanics during today's presentation. I believe I can provide the detailed data and a full functional demonstration that the Council requires. And now operating as an independent consultant. And please let me know if a private briefing would be of value. And please let him sabing siobing sein but minding over. Sincerely, Savannah Thorne, founder, AF, Edelred Designs, LLC. It was simple, direct, and devastating. It didn't accuse Callum of anything. It merely stated facts and offered a solution. It positioned me as the expert, the problem solver, and him as the obstruction. The second email was even shorter. It was to Marcus Chen. Subject: The future Mr. Chen. I hope this message finds you well. As of today, I am a free agent. The door is open. I am available to discuss building the future on a new foundation. Best, Savannah. I reread both drafts. There was no anger in them, no emotion at all. They were just clean, strategic moves on a chessboard. This wasn't about revenge. I said the words to myself again, a mantra to keep my own emotions in check. It wasn't about revenge. It was about market correction. Callum had presented a fraudulent product. I was simply providing the authentic one. My finger hovered over the send button. This was the moment, the point of no return. For 11 years I had played by their rules, in their house. I had built their towers, their monuments, their legacies, and they had paid me a salary to do it, all while erasing my name from the blueprints. Now, I was about to light a match, not to burn their house down, but to illuminate the path to my own. With a quiet click, the emails were gone. Out into the digital ether, two silent torpedoes sliding through the water towards their targets. I leaned back in my chair and took a deep breath. The air in the apartment suddenly felt different. It felt lighter. It felt like my own. For the first time in a very long time, I felt like I was breathing my own air. The silence was no longer heavy. It was full of potential. It was the quiet before the dawn. The response came faster than I expected. The digital world moves at the speed of information, and I had just injected a lethal dose of truth into the system. The first domino fell at 8:15 the next morning. It wasn't an email. It was a text message from a blocked number. It was from Liam. The message was a single, frantic line. All hell has broken loose. A minute later, another came through. Callum is in the main conference room, the glass one, screaming into his phone. I've never seen him like this. His face is the color of a beet. A small, grim smile touched my lips. I pictured the scene. The glass-walled conference room we called the fishbowl, designed for transparency, was now a theater for Callum's meltdown. Another text. The senior partners are all in there with him now. They look like they're at a funeral. The city council sent a formal inquiry overnight. It landed in every partner's inbox at 6 a.m. I knew what that meant. My email to Miss Albright had worked. She hadn't just read it. She had acted on it. She had weaponized it. The council's formal inquiry wouldn't have been a gentle request. It would have been a cold, legalistic demand for the supplementary data I had offered, likely with a very tight deadline. Liam's next text confirmed it. They want a full technical demonstration of the airflow management system. They used those exact words. They're also asking for the development logs and the IP registration documents for the proprietary software. The beauty of it was its precision. They weren't just asking if it worked. They were asking for the receipts. The very receipts I knew Callum didn't have. He continued. They've been tearing the servers apart all morning. It is in a panic. They can't find the source code for the algorithm anywhere. It's like it's a ghost. It was a ghost. Alistair's ghost in the machine. A ghost that answered only to me. I sent a simple reply to Liam. Stay calm. Do your work. Don't get involved. His response came back instantly. Too late. I'm already on your side. Just tell me when. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. The gravity of competence was already working. He wasn't defecting. He was correcting his own career trajectory towards a place where the work mattered. The second domino fell an hour later. An email landed in my inbox. The sender was an assistant from Marcus Chen's development fund. Mr. Chen sends his regards. He would be delighted to have lunch with you tomorrow. The Four Seasons at 1 o'clock. A car will be sent for you. It wasn't a question. It was a summons. And it was exactly what I had hoped for. Chen wasn't just responding.
Nope.
He was rolling out the red carpet. He had seen my flare in the night and was sending a rescue cruiser, not a lifeboat. The silent takeover was in motion. It wasn't a noisy coup. It was a quiet redirection of power. The old firm Sterling and Blackwood was a hub of bluster and panic. They were making noise. They were scrambling, shouting, trying to plug a hole in a dam that had already been structurally compromised. Meanwhile, I was quietly setting up meetings, scheduling lunches, and preparing my presentation. The one Callum should have had. The real one. My meeting with Miss Albright was that afternoon. We met in a sterile, anonymous coffee shop downtown, far from City Hall and the polished towers of the financial district. She was exactly as I had imagined. Sharp, no nonsense, with eyes that seemed to take in everything. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. She motioned for me to sit. I read your email, she said, stirring her black coffee. Your former partner's performance was, to put it mildly, disappointing. He was selling a vision he clearly did not understand. I just nodded. I didn't badmouth Callum or the firm. There was no need. His incompetence had spoken for itself. It wasn't about revenge. It was about clarity. I simply said, the vision is sound. The execution of the presentation was flawed. She gave a wry smile, a very diplomatic way of putting it. Show me. I opened my laptop. The same one I had used to build my contingency plan. I didn't show her slides. I showed her the living system. I ran the full dynamic simulation of the Athelred algorithm on the screen. The 3D model of the Citadel came to life. I introduced a simulated heat wave, and we watched in real time as the algorithm responded, rerouting cool air through the thermal conduits, venting heat through the microvents in the facade. The building's internal temperature held steady, a cool blue island in a sea of digital red. I showed her the code, the development logs, time-stamped, dating back years. I walked her through the physics, the theory Alistair and I had developed. I was in my element. I was speaking my native language, the language of data, of systems, of elegant solutions. For 20 minutes, I didn't stop. When I was done, I closed the laptop. Miss Albright was silent for a long moment, just looking at me. Then she said, I have been on the City Planning Council for 15 years. I have seen hundreds of pitches. Most of them are fantasy, dressed up in expensive renderings. This is real. This is the most impressive piece of sustainable engineering I have ever seen. Thank you, I said, my voice steady, though my heart was hammering. She leaned forward. Sterling and Blackwood have until Friday to respond to our inquiry. They will fail. When they do, the bid will be officially reopened. The city needs this building, but we need it to work. We need the person who can make it work. She paused, letting the words hang in the air. I would strongly advise Athelred Designs to submit a proposal, and there it was, not just an invitation, a directive. The city wasn't just offering me a seat at the table. They were offering me the head of it. I left the coffee shop and walked out into the crisp autumn air. The sun was bright, the sky a brilliant, cloudless blue. The city felt different. It was no longer a landscape of buildings that belonged to other people. It was a landscape of possibility. That evening, I got the call I had been expecting. The caller ID flashed a name I hadn't seen in years. Callum Blackwood. I let it ring twice, then answered, my voice a calm, neutral, Savannah Thorne. His voice was a strained, unfamiliar thing, stripped of its usual booming confidence. Savannah, we need to talk. Oh, I said, feigning mild surprise. There's been a misunderstanding, he stammered. A miscommunication about the Citadel presentation. I let the silence stretch, forcing him to fill it. Look, he said, his voice dropping. A desperate attempt at intimacy. I may have mishandled it. I was under a lot of pressure. The partners, the council, I should have had you there with me. I see that now. I remained silent. I could hear his shallow breathing on the other end of the line. He tried a different tack, shifting from apology to bargaining. The partners and I have been talking. We value your contributions, Savannah. We always have. We want to make this right. We're prepared to offer you a junior partnership, and you'll be the official lead on the Citadel project. Your name on everything. We just need you to help us with this council inquiry. We need the source code. It was the offer I had dreamed of for years, the validation I had craved, a partnership, the lead role, my name in lights. And now that it was here, it felt like ash in my mouth. It wasn't a real offer. It was a ransom note. He wasn't offering me a promotion. He was trying to buy back the keys to his kingdom. I thought about the 11 years of being overlooked, the stolen credit, the condescending pats on the head, the lie of the senior voice, and I felt nothing, just a cold, clear certainty. I'm sorry, Callum, I said, my voice even. I don't think I can help you with that. What? What do you mean? His voice cracked with panic. Savannah, don't do this. Don't throw away your career over a bruised ego. It was a classic Callum move. When all else fails, accuse the other person of being emotional. My career is just fine, I replied, the words sharp and clean as glass. You were the one who said the project needed a senior voice to sell the vision. It turns out you were right. The city council is looking for one, and I have a meeting with them on Monday. I didn't wait for a reply. I didn't need to hear the sputtering, the threats, the pleading. I ended the call. The silent takeover was complete. The power had not just shifted, it had been entirely transferred. The throne he had tried to steal was one I had already dismantled and rebuilt for myself on higher ground. The lunch with Marcus Chen was less a meeting and more a coronation. The Four Seasons was the kind of place where power was the main currency, a hushed sanctuary of quiet deals and unspoken understandings. The car he sent was a black Mercedes, and as I stepped out, a doorman greeted me by name. Chen had arranged everything. He was waiting for me at a corner table with a panoramic view of the park. He stood as I approached, a gesture of respect that Callum had never once afforded me. He was older, with a calm, watchful energy. He didn't smile much, but his eyes were sharp and missed nothing. Savannah, he said, his voice a low baritone. Thank you for coming. Please. He gestured to the chair opposite him. The pleasure is all mine, Mr. Chen, I replied, sitting down. He waved a hand dismissively. Marcus, please. We've spent enough late nights on video calls to be on a first-name basis. The waiter appeared, poured water, and vanished. Chen got straight to the point. I received your email. I also read the business journals this morning. It seems Sterling and Blackwood are having a difficult week. He said it without a trace of schadenfreude. It was a simple statement of fact, like commenting on the weather. It would appear so, I said, keeping my tone neutral. He leaned forward slightly. Let's not waste each other's time with pretense, Savannah. I've been in this business for 40 years. I know talent when I see it, and I know a fool when I see one. I've known for years that you were the engine in that firm, and Callum Blackwood was just the polished hood ornament. I was simply waiting for the engine to realize it didn't need the car. His directness was disarming. He saw the situation not as drama, but as a simple equation that had finally been solved. He continued, the Citadel project is impressive, but I have something else in mind, something bigger, a new development on the waterfront, a mixed-use biocampus. We're not just building a tower, we're building an ecosystem. It requires a level of integrated, sustainable design that no one has ever attempted. It requires a system like the one you've built. It requires a mind like yours at the helm. He paused, letting his words sink in. This wasn't a job offer. This was an invitation to a new level of the game. I'm not interested in hiring you as a consultant, Savannah. I'm interested in being the anchor client for Athelred Designs. I want to fund your vision. We will provide the seed capital to scale your firm, the contracts to give you immediate stability, and the global stage to showcase your work. In return, my fund gets exclusive first rights to your technology for our North American projects for the next 5 years. I was stunned. I had come here expecting to pitch my services for a single project. He was offering me a kingdom. He was offering me the resources to build my manifesto, my 50-page business plan, into a living, breathing entity. He saw the look on my face and allowed himself a small, rare smile. I'm not a philanthropist, Savannah. I'm a capitalist. I am making a strategic investment in the most valuable asset I've seen in a decade. You. The weight of his offer settled on me. It was everything I had been working towards, delivered in a single, quiet conversation. The years of quiet work, of building my skills, of cultivating my secret contingency plan, it had all led to this moment. The power hadn't just shifted from Callum to me, it had been amplified 100-fold. I found my voice. Marcus, I don't know what to say. Say you'll have your lawyer look over the term sheet. I'll have sent to you this afternoon, he said. That's all you need to say for now. The rest of the lunch was a blur. We talked about design philosophy, about the future of cities, about Alistair's theories. It was a conversation between peers, between builders. When I left the restaurant, the city looked even brighter than before. The next day, Liam's official resignation landed on every partner's desk at Sterling and Blackwood. He sent me a copy. It was short, professional, and devastatingly effective. It stated that his decision was based on a desire to work in an environment that prioritizes design integrity and technical innovation, a clear and direct condemnation of the firm's current leadership. He was at my apartment door, an hour later, with a box of his personal effects and his work laptop. "Welcome to Athelred Designs," I said, opening the door. He grinned, the first genuine relaxed smile I'd seen on his face in months. "The pay is terrible, and the office is a mess." "It's a startup," I replied, smiling back. "It's supposed to be." The desperate counterattack from Callum when it came was almost pathetic. He left a voicemail on my phone. His voice was no longer pleading, but laced with a new, hollow bravado. "Savannah," he said, "you're making a huge mistake. You think you can just walk away and steal our clients, steal our projects. We have a team of lawyers, and they're drawing up a lawsuit for intellectual property theft and breach of contract that will bury your little startup before it even gets off the ground. You have 24 hours to reconsider my offer." It was an empty threat, and we both knew it. My legal foundation was solid. His was built on sand. And now, with Marcus Chen's formidable legal team on my side, it was a fight he couldn't possibly win. He was a man with a water pistol facing a battleship. It wasn't about revenge. It was about overwhelming force, quietly and strategically applied. I deleted the voicemail without a second thought. The old world was gone. The power had not only shifted, it had found its rightful home. Vindication didn't arrive with a thunderclap. There was no single dramatic moment of victory. It was a slow, quiet dawn. It was the accumulation of small, decisive events that solidified the new reality, a reality I had meticulously designed. The lawsuit Callum threatened never materialized. My lawyer, a sharp, unflappable woman recommended by Marcus Chen's team, sent a single polite letter to the partners at Sterling and Blackwood. It included a detailed timeline of my development of the Athelred system, complete with file creation metadata, email correspondence with Dr. Finch predating my work on the Citadel, and copies of my provisional patent filings. It concluded by stating that any legal action would be met with a vigorous countersuit for defamation and tortious interference. It was a quiet, professional checkmate. They folded. The Citadel contract was officially and publicly revoked from Sterling and Blackwood. The City Council cited failure to substantiate core project claims and a fundamental misrepresentation of technical capabilities. The news hit the architectural journals, a public humiliation for a firm that had built its reputation on prestige. A week later, the city officially opened the project for a new round of bidding. Athelred Designs was the first to submit a proposal. We won it, unanimously. The final confrontation with Callum, if you can call it that, happened 3 months later. It was at the annual Architects Guild Gala, a stuffy affair I usually avoided, but now had to attend as the head of a newly prominent firm. I was standing with Marcus Chen and Miss Albright, who was now a vocal champion of our work, discussing the groundbreaking ceremony for the Citadel. I saw him across the crowded room. He looked smaller, deflated. The $1,000 suit hung on him differently, no longer a suit of armor but a costume he was struggling to fill. He was alone, nursing a drink, his eyes scanning the room with a look of desperate, searching relevance. Our eyes met for a brief second. A flicker of something, anger, regret, fear, passed across his face. He started to move towards me, a hesitant, shuffling step, as if pulled by some grim magnetic force. My first instinct was to tense up, to prepare a sharp retort. But then I looked at Marcus and Miss Albright, both talking animatedly about the future, about the building we were going to create. I realized in that moment that Callum was no longer part of my story. He was a character from the prologue. He was a few feet away when I simply turned my back to him. A slight, almost imperceptible shift of my shoulder, and re-engaged in my conversation with Marcus. I didn't ignore him with malice. I just ignored him. I erased him from my reality as completely as he had once tried to erase me from his. It was a silent, bloodless execution. I felt Marcus's hand briefly touch my elbow, a small gesture of solidarity. He had seen it. He understood. Callum stopped dead, then turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. I never saw him in person again. The news of his final exit came a month after that, not in a press release, but through the industry grapevine, a quiet text from a former colleague. Callum Blackwood had been forced into an early retirement by the remaining partners. They were trying to salvage the firm's reputation, cutting away the diseased limb to save the body. The firm itself was struggling. Several other key clients, emboldened by Marcus Chen's move, had pulled their contracts. Talented designers, including 3 I had mentored, had resigned. The foundation was rotten, and the structure was beginning to collapse under its own weight. It all happened as a consequence of his own choices. His arrogance, his laziness, his belief that presentation mattered more than substance. I hadn't destroyed him. I had simply held up a mirror, and the world had finally seen the truth. It wasn't about revenge. I found myself thinking the phrase again, and for the first time, it felt completely true. It was about gravity. He had tried to defy it, and it had pulled him back down to earth. The final scene of this chapter of my life didn't take place in a glittering ballroom or a tense boardroom. It took place in a large, empty space on the 35th floor of a downtown office building. The walls were still bare drywall. The floor was raw concrete, but the view of the city was breathtaking. This was the new home of Athelred Designs. Light poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Aldat poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Desks were being assembled. Computers were being unboxed. A small team of 6, including a beaming Liam, was bustling around, the air filled with the excited energy of creation. My team, my firm. I walked to what would be my office, a corner space with a view that stretched all the way to the harbor. On a makeshift table sat the newly printed blueprints for the Citadel. I ran my finger over the title block in the bottom right corner. Project, the Citadel client. The city of __________ lead architect. Savannah Thorne Firm. Athelred Designs. My name, my firm, my foundation. It was all there in clean black ink. I had built my own structure. It was solid, it was real, and it was just the beginning. The vindication wasn't in Callum's fall. It was in my own quiet, steady, undeniable rise. Today, my office doesn't look like a construction site. It's finished, minimalist, and clean, filled with light. On my desk, next to my laptop and a model of the Citadel, sits a small, simple frame. It doesn't hold a photo or a degree. It holds a printout of a single line of text from an old email. The best structures are built on an honest foundation. Alistair's final words to me, it's my compass, my true north. I'm telling you this story not to brag, not to gloat. I'm telling you because I know I'm not the only one. They say success is the best revenge, but I've come to believe that's not quite right. Revenge is a hot, messy, emotional thing. It's about tearing something down. What I did, this was never about revenge. It was about restoration. It was about taking a blueprint they tried to erase and building it for myself to my own specifications, on my own terms. It's about the profound, quiet satisfaction of correction. So for anyone out there watching this, for anyone who has ever had their name scrubbed from their own work, who has been told to be quiet while someone else takes the credit, who has felt their soul being eroded by 1,000 tiny cuts in a job they once loved, know this. Your work has a voice. Your contribution has weight. Your foundation is your own. You are the architect of your own life, your own career. Sometimes, the system you're in is designed to ignore your voice. Sometimes, the structure is fundamentally flawed, and when you realize that, you have a choice. You can keep patching the cracks in their foundation, or you can go out and pour your own. It's terrifying. It's the hardest thing you'll ever do, but it's the only way to build something that will truly last. Build your own foundations, build your own walls, build your own damn cathedral, and put your own name on the door. It's the only revenge that matters. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt that frustration or dreamed of that restoration, please let me know in the comments below. It truly helps to know that we're not alone in these fights. And if you found value in this, like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear that it's possible. And of course, hit that subscribe button for more stories about reclaiming what's yours. Thank you for listening.